she just had this effervescent person.
Even of Boulder, a place that, disdained mink coats.
It's a beautiful spot, but very different than what we were used to. We were business people in a...
That look from John Ramsey made them question what kind of man they were dealing with. He was the first to find JonBenet. He picked her up, held her. Just like that, he ruined the crime scene. Wiped it clean of what could have been the truth, but somehow, the cops didn't seem to care much about him. Not like they did with Patsy. Not like they did with Burke. He was the head of that house, the one in control. Yet, they saw him as harmless, as uninvolved. Was he really just another grieving father? Or was he the one who knew exactly how it all went down? Who is John Ramsey? JonBenet Ramsey was born in Lincoln, Nebraska. He pursued higher education at Michigan State University, earned a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering in 1966, and later an MBA in 1971. His early career included military service, joining the U.S. Navy in 1966 as an officer in the Civil Engineer Corps, serving 3 years in the Philippines and 8 additional years in a reserve unit in Atlanta. A licensed pilot, he owned 2 private planes, reflecting his interest in aviation. John was the son of Mary Jane and James Dudley. J. Ramsey, a decorated World War II pilot, and his upbringing in Nebraska shaped his early life before he built a successful career and family. In his personal life, John Ramsey's family was complex and evolved through multiple marriages. He first married Lucinda Pash in 1966, and they had 3 children: Elizabeth, Melinda, and John Andrew. Their marriage lasted 11 years, ending divorce in 1978, though no public details specify the reasons for their separation. In 1980, John married Patsy Ramsey, a former beauty queen, and together they had 2 children, Burke and JonBenet Patricia Ramsey, born on August 6, 1990. As a father, John was deeply involved in his children's lives, supporting their activities and serving as the family's primary provider. The Ramsey family resided in a home at 755 15th Street in Boulder, Colorado by 1996, where John and Patsy raised their children in a stable, affluent household. Professionally, John Ramsey achieved significant success before 1996. In 1989, he founded Advanced Product Group, which merged with 2 other companies to form Access Graphics, a computer services firm. As president and CEO, he led Access Graphics to become a subsidiary of Lockheed Martin in 1991, and by 1996, the company generated over $1 billion in revenue. His leadership earned him the title of Entrepreneur of the Year from the Boulder Chamber of Commerce in 1996, and his net worth was made at $6.4 million that May. John's career provided financial security for his family, allowing them to maintain a comfortable lifestyle in Boulder. His role as a business leader and family patriarch defined his life during this period. His professional success culminated in a substantial bonus of $118,000, a significant sum that underscored his financial achievements and the stability he provided for his family. This bonus, received in the weeks before Christmas, highlighted his prominent status in the business world. Beyond his professional life, John was actively engaged in family and community events during the festive season. The Ramsey family, known for their involvement at St. John's Episcopal Church in Boulder, likely participated in holiday-related religious or community activities, though no specific church events attended by John in the week before December 25 are documented. As a supportive father, John played a role in his daughter JonBenet's participation in children's beauty pageants, which were a significant part of the family's activities in December 1996. While Patsy Ramsey primarily managed JonBenet's pageant schedule, John was involved, possibly attending rehearsals or performances, including a notable appearance by JonBenet at a local Boulder shopping mall shortly before Christmas. His presence at such events reflected his commitment to his children's interests. John also maintained close ties with Boulder's affluent and influential community, frequently socializing with families like the Whites and the Steins. On December 23, 1996, John, along with Patsy, JonBenet, and Burke, attended a Christmas party at the home of their close friends, Fleet and Priscilla White. This gathering was a highlight of their holiday season, showcasing the Ramseys' active social life. Additionally, was preparing for a family trip to Charlevoix, Michigan, where they owned a vacation home, planning to reunite with his older children, Melinda and John Andrew, from his first marriage. As a licensed pilot with 2 private planes, he had arranged to fly the family for this post-Christmas getaway, with preparations underway in the days leading up to December 25. These activities painted a picture of a busy yet fulfilling period for John Ramsey, balancing work, family, and community engagement. For more details of the Christmas party, a time mark believed to be pivotal in the case, it was on the evening of December 23, 1996, John Ramsey, along with Patsy, JonBenet, and Burke, attended a lively Christmas party at the home of their close friends, Fleet and Priscilla White, in Boulder, Colorado. The white residence, located in the same affluent neighborhood as the Ramseys' home at 755 15th Street, hosted a festive gathering that included other prominent Boulder families. Earlier that same evening, the Ramseys had hosted their own Christmas party at their home from approximately 5 to 8 p.m., welcoming 30 to 40 guests, including friends and family. The celebration featured children decorating gingerbread houses and a visit from a Santa Claus impersonator, Bill McReynolds. During this event, Patsy gave JonBenet a gold bracelet engraved with her name and the date, 25/12/96, originally intended as a Christmas Day gift. JonBenet was seen wearing the bracelet in a black and white outfit. Guests included R.A. Brown, Priscilla White's parents, and Cliff Gaston, a friend of the Whites, among others. John, as the host, likely engaged with attendees, though no specific actions by him were recorded. A mysterious 911 call was made from the Ramsey home at 6:48 p.m. but was disconnected before contact was established. When police called back, they reached voicemail, and an officer dispatched to the home was reassured by Susan Stein, a family friend, that opined accidental call, possibly related to a medication order for an elderly relative. No report was filed, and the officer left by 7:09 p.m. On Christmas Day, December 25, the Ramseys celebrated at home. JonBenet received a bicycle as a gift, and the family engaged in typical holiday activities, such as opening presents and sharing meals. That evening, John Ramsey was noted to have carried JonBenet to bed after the day's festivities. Some sources speculate JonBenet may have eaten pineapple night, but no confirmed details tie John to this. In the early hours of December 26, 1996, the Ramsey household stirred with urgency. Around 5:30 a.m., Patsy Ramsey awoke to make coffee, preparing for a planned family trip to Charlevoix, Michigan, where John, a licensed pilot, intended to fly them in his private plane. Shortly after, between 5:30 and 5:45 a.m., Patsy checked JonBenet's room, possibly to wake her, and discovered she was not there, sparking immediate concern. Around 5:45 a.m., Patsy found a 3-page ransom note on the back spiral staircase of their home, written on paper from a household notepad, demanding $118,000, the exact amount of John's recent Christmas bonus from Access Graphics, and claiming JonBenet had been kidnapped. Patsy alerted John, who read the note, and together they quickly searched the house but found no trace of JonBenet. They also checked on Burke, confirming he was safely asleep in his room. By 5:52 a.m., Patsy dialed 911 from the home phone, reporting JonBenet's disappearance and the ransom note in a frantic 6-minute call, officially notifying authorities of the crisis.
Emergency. Police. What's going on? By 515th Street. What's going on there, ma'am? We have a kidnapping. Hurry, please. Explain to me what's going on, okay? There's a note left and our daughter's gone. A note was left and your daughter is gone? How old is your daughter? 6 years old. She's gone. 6 years old. How long ago was it? I don't know. I just found the note. And my daughter's gone. Does it say who took her? What? Does it say who took her? I don't know. There's a ransom note here.
The 911 call made by Patsy Ramsey on the morning of December 26 presents a number of linguistic and behavioral anomalies that raise serious questions about its authenticity and purpose. From the very beginning, Patsy's responses diverge from what would typically be expected in a genuine emergency call. Instead of directly answering the operator's initial question, "What's going on?" Patsy begins by stating her address. While this might seem like a practical move to get help faster, it also suggests the possibility of a pre-rehearsed script, a carefully planned sequence of responses rather than a spontaneous plea for help. Her next words, "We have a kidnapping," are notably passive. She does not say who has been kidnapped, nor does she identify herself in connection to the victim. The use of "wa" instead of "I" is also striking. This phrasing dilutes personability and emotional connection, creating psychological distance from the victim, her own daughter. As the call continues, this lack of emotional immediacy becomes even more apparent. Patsy repeatedly refers to a ransom note before mentioning that her daughter is missing, subtly shifting the focus from a lost child to a found object. This prioritization seems odd and unnatural for a distressed parent. Furthermore, she continues to use collective pronouns like "wa" and phrases like "or daughter" instead of "my daughter," which undermines the personal grief and panic that would be expected in such a situation. The storytelling feels detached, more like a narration of facts than an expression of panic or terror. Her choice of words also stands out. Patsy repeats "please" multiple times throughout the call, more than would be typical in an emergency. While politeness isn't inherently suspicious, excessive courtesy in a 911 call can be a red flag for deceptive behavior, as it may be an unconscious attempt to appear calm or cooperative. She also frequently uses the word "just." For instance, saying she "just got the note." This word is often used to narrow scope and preempt further questioning, signaling a desire to control the narrative and deflect deeper inquiry. More concerning is what's missing from the call. Patsy never references any possible perpetrator. There is no speculation, no mention of someone breaking in, or concern over who might have taken her daughter. She also fails to bring up the ransom note's warnings against calling the police, a detail that would almost certainly be mentioned by someone genuinely afraid for their child's life. Most disturbingly, there is an utter lack of expressed concern for JonBenet's safety or emotional state. Patsy never asked the operator for advice on what to do, how to find her daughter, or what might happen to her. The absence of these natural, urgent concerns is alarming. That said, some of Patsy's responses come across as credible. When she responds with, "I don't know," to certain factual questions, it may indicate truthfulness, as deceptive individuals are often reluctant to admit a lack of knowledge. These moments offer some authenticity, but they are surrounded by troubling inconsistencies and emotional detachment. Perhaps the most revealing moment comes after the main call appears to end. Unbeknownst to Patsy, the line remains open, and background audio captures what seems to be a heated exchange between multiple people. One voice, believed to be John Ramsey, says, "We aren't speaking to you," while another voice, likely Patsy's, repeatedly asks, "What did you do?" These comments seem directed at their son, Burke, who the Ramseys claimed had been asleep the entire time. This off-script moment introduces the possibility of internal family conflict and undermines the earlier narrative presented in the call. While it is clear that Patsy was the one who dialed 911, the true intent behind the call, whether it was a genuine cry for help or part of a larger attempt to manage a tragic situation, remains deeply ambiguous. Following Patsy Ramsey's frantic 911 call at 5:52 a.m. on December 26, 1996, reporting JonBenet's disappearance and the discovery of a ransom note, police arrived at the Ramsey home. John Ramsey initially cooperated with the officers, providing details about the ransom note and the family's situation. In the midst of the crisis, he reached out to close friends, including Fleet and Priscilla White, seeking emotional support. These friends arrived at the house that morning, moving freely through the home before it was properly secured as a crime scene. This decision to invite friends, despite the ransom note's warning against contacting anyone, raised suspicions among investigators and media. The presence of outsiders potentially compromised evidence, such as fingerprints or other traces, prompting questions about whether John intentionally allowed this disruption, though no direct evidence supports such intent. The lack of control over the scene, with friends reportedly cleaning the kitchen or touching objects, as noted by journalist Diane Diamond, was seen as unusual but could be attributed to panic and inexperience in handling such a crisis. Throughout the morning, John participated in a limited search of the house alongside police, who initially focused on securing JonBenet's room but neglected a thorough inspection of the basement. Details of John's actions between 6:00 a.m. and noon are sparse, leading some investigators to question whether he was actively searching for his daughter. This perceived lack of urgency was deemed unusual for a father whose child was missing, though it could reflect adherence to police instructions or emotional shock. Additionally, Kim Archuleta, the 911 dispatcher, noted in a CBS interview that John appeared calmer than Patsy during early interactions with police, a demeanor some found inconsistent with the expected panic of a grieving parent. However, this calmness could align with John's composed nature as a successful businessman, and no concrete evidence links it to wrongdoing. Around 1 p.m., Detective Linda Arndt, the lead officer at the scene, instructed John and Fleet to conduct a thorough search of the house for anything unusual. John and Fleet went directly to the basement, where John opened the door to a small storage room used for Christmas decorations. There, he discovered JonBenet's body on the floor, covered by a white blanket, with duct tape over her mouth and a garrote around her neck. In a moment of distress, John removed the tape, lifted her body, and carried it upstairs, screaming as he placed her near the Christmas tree in the living room. This action was highly suspicious to investigators, as it disturbed critical evidence, including the body's position, potential fingerprints on the tape, and DNA traces. Linda Arndt, in a 1999 Good Morning America interview, described a wordless exchange with John that left her suspecting his involvement, though this observation was subjective. The choice to check the basement directly and locate the body so quickly also raised questions, with some, like CBS's 2016 documentary, suggesting John might have known its location, though no evidence confirms this. His emotional outburst upon finding JonBenet could equally reflect a father's instinctive reaction to such a horrific discovery. For the remains, the JonBenet Ramsey case hinges on a collection of evidence that has fueled decades of speculation, pointing to both the Ramsey family and an unknown intruder as potential suspects. Let's analyze what this says about John's position in this case. The ransom note, discovered by Patsy Ramsey around 5:45 a.m. on December 26, 1996, stands as a central piece of evidence. Written on paper from the Ramsey household, it demanded $18,000, matching John Ramsey's Christmas bonus, and contained theatrical language reminiscent of movie scripts, leading the FBI to note its unusual length and detail compared to typical kidnapping notes. Behavioral analysts suggested the note's maternal tone and insider knowledge of John's bonus pointed to someone close to the family, with suspicion falling on Patsy due to inconclusive handwriting analysis that couldn't rule her out, though no definitive evidence links her to writing it. John and Burke Ramsey were excluded as authors, but the note's creation at the scene and the absence of follow-up calls from any kidnappers raised doubts about its authenticity, suggesting a possible staging. This keeps Patsy as a key suspect, though an intruder with time to prepare inside the home remains a plausible alternative. JonBenet's body, found by John Ramsey in the basement wine cellar around 1 p.m. on December 26, 1996, provides critical clues. The autopsy revealed she died from strangulation via a garrote made from a broken paintbrush owned by Patsy, coupled with a severe skull fracture. Signs of assault, including vaginal abrasions and blood, suggested a possible sexual motive, though the absence of semen complicated this theory. The body was covered with a white blanket, which, along with its placement in a rarely used room, implied the perpetrator knew the house well. However, the partial covering didn't align with typical parental behavior, reducing the likelihood of family staging, per Wikipedia. Penny apple in JonBenet's stomach, possibly eaten hours before her death between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m., conflicted with John and Patsy's claim that she didn't eat that night. A bowl of pineapple in the kitchen bore Burke's fingerprints, though their age couldn't be determined, fueling speculation about his involvement despite his young age of 9. John's act of moving the body and removing duct tape disrupted the scene, drawing suspicion from investigators like Linda Arndt, though this could reflect a father's emotional response. The garrote's sophisticated design and sexual assault evidence support an intruder theory, but the use of household items keeps the family, particularly Patsy, under scrutiny. Unidentified male DNA found on JonBenet's underwear, leggings under her fingernails, and on the garrote is the strongest evidence supporting an intruder. This DNA, not matching any Ramsey family member or CODIS database entry in 2003, led District Attorney Mary Lacey to publicly exonerate the Ramseys in 2008. Experts like Candace DeLong and Lawrence Kobylinski argue this DNA likely belongs to the killer, though Michael Baden suggested it could be trace contamination from manufacturing. The DNA's complexity, possibly from multiple individuals, and John Ramsey's 2024 call for advanced genealogical testing highlight its unresolved potential. This evidence significantly weakens the case against John, Patsy, and Burke, while pointing to an unknown male intruder, though no specific suspect. Additional physical evidence further complicates the case. A broken basement window and a Samsonite suitcase beneath it, containing glass and dirt, were cited by investigator Lou Smith as a possible entry point for an intruder, though intact cobwebs suggested it wasn't recently used, per Boulder PD. John Ramsey's prior admission of breaking the window when locked out raised doubts about its relevance. A high-tech boot print in the basement mold, not matching any family member, and an unidentified Caucasian pubic hair on the blanket bolster the intruder theory but lack specific ties to a suspect. A rope in a nearby bedroom, not owned by the Ramseys, and a flashlight on the kitchen counter, potentially used in the skull injury but lacking blood or DNA, add to the mystery without conclusive links. Suspected stun gun marks on JonBenet's face and back, supported by Lou Smith and Michael Iverson but disputed by Werner Spitz, suggest a professional tool, favoring an intruder but remaining unconfirmed due to the absence of the device. The 911 call made by Patsy at 5:52 a.m. introduced further suspicion about the family. Enhanced audio analysis detected background voices, including one resembling Burke's, contradicting claims he slept through the night. Patsy's choice of words like "gone" and "missing" was flagged as deceptive by some analysts, and John's reported calmness added to doubts, though his demeanor could reflect his professional composure. This audio evidence casts suspicion on Patsy and Burke, but its ambiguity prevents firm conclusions. It is readily apparent that John Ramsey's presence looms large in connection to the evidence in the JonBenet Ramsey case. Yet the links are consistently too weak to solidify him as a suspect. From discovering JonBenet's body in the basement and disturbing the scene by removing duct tape and carrying her upstairs, to the ransom note referencing his exact $118,000 Christmas bonus, and even the physical evidence like the garrote and stun gun marks that some tied to an intruder, John is entangled in nearly every key piece of evidence. However, handwriting analysis ruled him out, as the note's author. DNA evidence on JonBenet's clothing and under her fingernails did not match him, and his actions, such as moving the body, can be explained as a father's emotional response rather than deliberate tampering. Despite these connections, the lack of conclusive evidence ensures John remains on the periphery of suspicion, never fully implicated as the perpetrator. However, in a deeper dive, we must see obvious red flags. We got the most disturbing one, that Detective Linda Arndt, the first investigator at the Ramsey home, on December 26, 1996, articulated her suspicions about John Ramsey's involvement in JonBenet's murder, particularly focusing on the moment he carried his daughter's body from the basement. Arndt's suspicion was not based on a single action, but an accumulation of factors. The lack of forced entry, absence of tracks or sounds during the night, John being the last to see JonBen alive, and the peculiarities of the ransom note. However, her testimony heavily emphasized the unusual manner in which John carried JonBenet's body as a pivotal reason for her belief that he was the murderer. She described John holding JonBenet with his arms around her upper legs, her body extended upward and away from his, with her head positioned above his own, preventing him from seeing her face. This posture, which Arndt demonstrated during the deposition, struck her as unnatural for a father discovering his deceased child, as it suggested a deliberate distancing rather than the expected cradling of a loved one. Arndt found it particularly striking that JonBenet was clearly dead, yet John carried her in a way that seems detached, contrasting with typical parental instincts. Additionally, John's ability to go directly to the basement's wine cellar, where JonBenet's body was found, raised questions for Arndt, as the police had not thoroughly searched that area earlier. While these observations fueled her suspicion, they remained subjective, lacking corroborating physical evidence, and could be interpreted as a father's instinctive reaction under extreme distress rather than an indication of guilt. What do you think about this? The plan of John Ramsey. Delving deeper into John Ramsey, many argue that his apparent innocence in numerous aspects of the JonBenet Ramsey case stemmed from his wealth and influence at the time. Throughout the investigation, several details raised genuine questions about his involvement, suggesting that John Ramsey requires far more explanation than the brief public defenses he offered through media appearances. Let's go first with his most well-known lies. In the JonBenet Ramsey case, several inconsistencies in John Ramsey's statements have been flagged as potential lies, raising suspicions about his involvement or motives, though none conclusively prove guilt. One significant issue emerged shortly after John discovered JonBenet's body around 1 p.m. on December 6, 1996. Approximately 20 minutes later at 1:40 p.m., Detective Bill Palmer overheard John arranging a flight to Atlanta, claiming an urgent business meeting, despite police instructions to remain in Boulder. This claim was dubious, as it seems implausible for a father to prioritize a business trip so soon after finding his murdered daughter, suggesting possible panic or an attempt to flee scrutiny. The abruptness of this action, as noted in JonBenet Ramsey, Missing Innocence, portrays a rattled John deviating from his typically composed demeanor, which could imply a motive to distance himself from the investigation. Another inconsistency involves John's account of the night of December 25, 1996. Initially, he told officers French and Arndt that after returning from the White's Christmas party around 10 p.m., he read to JonBenet and Burke before bed, confirming to Arndt that he read to JonBenet after tucking her in. Months later, he claimed JonBenet was asleep when they returned, a version he maintained thereafter. This contradiction raises questions about whether John was crafting a narrative to obscure events that night, possibly to conceal a timeline that might implicate him or another family member. The shift in his story could suggest a motive to align his account with Patsy's or to avoid details that might invite further scrutiny, though no direct evidence ties this to the crime. John's claim of leaving the house between 10:30 a.m. and noon on December 26 to retrieve mail also drew suspicion. As reported by Detective Linda Arndt, the Ramsey home received mail through a front door slot, making a 90-minute absence to Fetch mail. Implausible. This unexplained disappearance, during a critical period when police were present, suggests John might have been attending to something he wished to conceal, such as disposing of evidence or coordinating with others. However, without corroborating evidence, this could also reflect a need for solitude amid the crisis, though the lie about the mail's location undermines his credibility. Conflicting accounts between John and Patsy about who decided to call 911 further fuel suspicion. Patsy claimed it was her idea, stating she told John she would call the police, and he agreed while checking on Burke. Conversely, John told CNN's Ted Cabell that he read the ransom note, which warned against contacting police, but instructed Patsy to call 911 immediately. This discrepancy is significant. If the ransom note was part of a cover-up to buy time for moving JonBenet's body, the person initiating the 911 call might not be the guilty party, as it disrupted such a plan. John's claim to have pushed for the call could suggest a motive to appear cooperative, or it might indicate genuine urgency, while the contradicting hints at possible coordination issues between John and Patsy, potentially masking a shared or individual motive. Finally, John's statement in an April 1997 police interview that he found a basement window open around 10:00 a.m. on December 26 closed it, and did not report it to police is highly suspicious. Officer French and Fleet White, who inspected the basement around 6:00 a.m., noted no open window, contradicting John's claim. This lie could imply a motive to fabricate evidence of an intruder to deflect suspicion from the family, especially since John admitted to breaking the window previously when locked out. Not reporting an open window during a kidnapping investigation is inexplicable, unless he sought to manipulate the narrative. Collectively, these alleged lies, planning to flee to Atlanta, contradicting bedtime routines, unexplained absence, conflicting 9/11 accounts, and the unreported window, suggest possible motives of covering up involvement, protecting another family member, or staging an external crime. However, the absence of physical evidence linking John to the murder, coupled with DNA exonerating the Ramseys, leaves these suspicions as points of doubt, rather than proof of guilt. Beside the lies, several additional points of suspicion surrounding John Ramsey in the JonBenet Ramsey case have fueled speculation about his involvement, though none provide conclusive evidence of guilt. One recurring concern stems from the autopsy findings, which indicated trauma estimated to have occurred from 7 to 10 days before JonBenet's death on December 26, 1996, suggesting possible prolonged abuse. This led some investigators and theorists to hypothesize that John, as a central figure in the household, might have been responsible for or aware of this abuse, potentially motivating him to silence JonBenet to prevent her from disclosing it. While this theory casts suspicion on John, no direct evidence, such as DNA or witness testimony, confirms his involvement in prior abuse, and the Ramsey family was exonerated by DNA evidence in 2008. Another point of suspicion involves unconfirmed reports of fibers matching John Ramsey's shirt found in JonBenet's underwear and vaginal area. These fibers, if accurate, could suggest John's direct contact with JonBenet during the crime, raising questions about his role in the assault or staging. However, this information was never officially verified or presented in court, rendering it speculative and unreliable. The lack of corroboration weakens its significance, but it persists in public discourse as a point of suspicion, amplified by theories that John's wealth and influence may have suppressed such evidence. John's admission that he broke a basement window months earlier to enter the locked house further complicates his narrative. This window was later considered a potential entry point for an intruder, as proposed by investigator Lou Smith. But its prior damage by John raised doubts. His claim of routinely entering his own home through the basement window, despite being the homeowner with access to keys, struck some as odd, suggesting he might have fabricated or exaggerated this story to support an intruder theory. This could imply a motive to deflect suspicion from the family. Though intact cobwebs around the window, noted by Boulder police, undermine the idea of recent use by anyone, including an intruder. Some theories shift suspicion from Patsy to John, positing that Patsy may have assisted in a cover-up, such as writing the ransom note, while John was the primary perpetrator, strangling JonBenet to conceal prior abuse. This hypothesis suggests John manipulated Patsy to protect himself, leveraging her panic to create a kidnapping. Additionally, unverified rumors of missing CCTV footage from a private airport, where John worked or stored his plane, have fueled speculation that he intentionally hid evidence, possibly using his financial resources and connections to influence the investigation. While these points raise questions about John's actions and potential motives, the absence of concrete evidence, coupled with DNA pointing to an unidentified male, keeps these suspicions speculative, with no definitive link to John as the perpetrator. Based on the available evidence and John Ramsey's possible motives, one particular theory has taken shape, one that many believe could explain the tangled mess of contradictions surrounding the evidence and the motives of everyone involved. This theory wasn't just some tabloid fantasy or wild speculation from the sidelines. It came from an ex-CIA analyst, someone trained to spot deception, to dissect behavior, to uncover hidden agendas. This hypothesis posits that John Ramsey orchestrated a calculated cover-up to protect himself from allegations of prior sexual abuse of JonBenet, manipulating his wife Patsy and son Burke to deflect suspicion onto Patsy, while staging a kidnapping. After returning from the White's Christmas party on December 25, 1996, the Ramseys were home, with Patsy packing for a trip. Burke, awake and snacking on pineapple in the kitchen, was joined by JonBenet. Irritated while playing with his trains in the basement, Burke struck JonBenet with an object, possibly a flashlight, due to his documented behavioral issues. When she didn't wake up, he alerted Patsy, who summoned John. Believing JonBenet was dead, though she was not, John devised a plan to shield himself from an autopsy revealing past sexual abuse, which he feared would implicate him. He convinced a panicked Patsy that Burke's accidental blow would ruin the family, persuading her to stage a kidnapping to protect them all, while intending for evidence to point to her alone. John allegedly instructed Patsy to write a ransom note, using household paper and referencing his 118,000 bonus to ensure it implicated her through handwriting and style. He provided guidelines, such as including a demand for a suitcase of money to justify leaving the house, but ensured the note's flaws, its length and theatrical tone, would reflect Patsy's panicked state. Meanwhile, John performed a mild sexual assault on JonBenet's body with Patsy's paintbrush, expecting an autopsy to attribute any abuse to this act, unaware it would reveal prior abuse. He wiped down evidence linked to himself and Burke, took a shower to eliminate traces, and disposed of his clothes, while leaving Patsy's evidence intact and denying her time to clean up, ensuring she appeared culpable. The garrote, made from Patsy's paintbrush, was used to strangle JonBenet, which John and Patsy believed was staging but actually caused her death, explaining Patsy's distress upon learning this. Realizing dumping the body was too risky, John altered the plan, convincing Patsy to hide JonBenet in the basement wine cellar and invite friends over to contaminate the scene and potentially frame them as intruders. He approved the poorly written note, placed by Patsy on the floor, and pushed for an immediate 911 call, using their planned flight as an excuse, while ensuring Patsy remained unwashed to preserve evidence against her. During the call, Burke briefly appeared, asking, "What did you find?" indicating he knew JonBenet was hurt but was sent back to bed to maintain his alibi of sleeping. John later handed investigators the notepad used for the note, deliberately implicating Patsy. When friends failed to find the body, John discovered it himself, moving it to contaminate evidence further and justify any residual DNA. John's alibi was simple. He claimed to have slept all night, waking only to Patsy's screams, a story easy to maintain with minimal risk of contradiction. Burke's identical alibi required little coaching, though his discomfort when shown a photo of the pineapple bowl during a later interview, betrayed his involvement in the snack. Patsy, burdened with inconsistent lies, contradicted herself frequently, as John intended. The intruder theory, meant to mislead Patsy, was not expected to convince police long-term due to its weak evidence. John's plan succeeded, leveraging police incompetence and DA leniency, with Patsy's sister removing evidence under the guise of funeral preparations. The hypothesis suggests John's calm manipulation ensured overwhelming evidence against Patsy, protecting him from abuse allegations, while leaving no provable link to his orchestration, unless he confesses. Behind the wave of accusations. Under the relentless scrutiny of flashing cameras and accusatory headlines, the Ramsey family made their not to run, but to fight. John and Patsy Ramsey wasted no time assembling a formidable defense. Top-tier attorneys, seasoned private investigators, and forensic psychologists were called in, each hand picked not only for their expertise, but for their willingness to push back against the tidal wave of public suspicion. Among them was Lou Smith, a veteran detective known for solving the most impossible cases. He wasn't hired to clear their names blindly, but to uncover facts, no matter where they led. At the same time, John and Patsy quietly launched a second, more personal battle, shielding their young son Burke from the chaos. While their faces filled tabloid covers, Burke was kept hidden from cameras, guarded from whispers that could haunt him for a lifetime. Inside their home, every window seemed to stare back with judgment. Yet outside, they were denied their right to speak freely. Their voices were drowned out by the noise of a nation convinced of their guilt. Speculation turned into obsession. Conspiracy theories ran wild, from dark allegations of parental abuse to whispers of secret family cover-ups. But John Ramsey didn't retreat. Time and time again, he stepped into the harsh glare of television studios and courtroom steps. His words were calm, yet sharp. His gaze was steady. "I did not kill my daughter."
I did not kill my daughter, JonBenet.
With every appearance, he dared the world to look beyond their assumptions, to see the father, not the suspect. He didn't beg for forgiveness, he demanded justice. But even as he stood unwavering, every interview sparked another debate. To some, he was a father wrongly accused. To others, a man hiding behind rehearsed lines and a polished mask. In the court of public opinion, John Ramsey's battle had only just begun. As public outrage escalated and the media spotlight intensified, quiet discoveries within the evidence began to tell a different, far more complex story. In a case driven by speculation, it was the hard science that spoke the loudest. Forensic analysts uncovered a critical finding: traces of male DNA, foreign and unidentified, on JonBenet's clothing. The results were indecisive. The genetic material did not match John Ramsey, Patsy Ramsey, or their son Burke. This discovery didn't just challenge the original theory, it dismantled it. For years, whispers of abuse had circulated. But medical records revealed no such history, no prior signs of physical trauma, no indication of systemic harm within the family. Beyond the laboratory, the physical evidence inside the home began to shift the narrative further. A broken basement window, long overlooked, was reevaluated under a new lens. Beneath it, a suitcase placed deliberately, possibly used to gain access or as a step to climb out. The overlooked detail suggested something far more sinister: the presence of an intruder who had slipped past initial suspicions. Yet perhaps the most damning evidence of all was procedural, not physical. The Boulder Police Department's early investigation was riddled with missteps. They failed to secure the scene. They allowed friends and family to roam freely, erasing the integrity of critical evidence. Entire rooms were ignored during the initial searches, leaving potential clues undiscovered for hours. What once looked like a thorough investigation now seemed to be a cascade of errors, oversight, and tunnel vision. Against this backdrop of investigative failure, two unlikely figures emerged to challenge the official narrative. Lou Smith, a homicide detective with a legendary track record, was brought into the case not to defend the Ramseys, but to uncover the truth, no matter where it led. Through meticulous analysis, Smith found patterns others had ignored. Entry points, escape paths, behavioral markers pointing not to an insider but to an outsider, premeditated and calculating. To him, this was not a crime of opportunity. Remember, it was the work of a predator. His conclusion was clear: the Ramseys were not responsible. But Smith wasn't alone. John Douglas, one of the FBI's most renowned criminal profilers, also reviewed the case. His profile painted a disturbing picture: a perpetrator driven by jealousy, obsession, or revenge, fixated on the Ramsey family from afar. Douglas saw no indicators that JonBenet's death was connected to anyone inside the house. Both men, independently, reached the same chilling conclusion: the true killer wasn't under their roof, it was someone still at large. Their voices offered clarity in a case clouded by noise. But for the Ramsey family, their vindication in the eyes of experts came too late to erase the scars already inflicted by the world. Watching it was a revelation that few had anticipated, one that hit like a fault line beneath the foundation of everything people thought they understood. For years, John Ramsey's name had been synonymous with guilt. To many, he wasn't just connected to the crime, he was the crime. His face had become an icon of parental betrayal, dissected endlessly on television screens and across magazine covers. But as the DNA evidence emerged, it began to unravel that narrative with quiet precision. The new information wasn't shouted from the rooftops. It arrived slowly, in lab reports, expert testimonies, and forensic analysis that couldn't be argued away. Suddenly, the man once painted as a calculating suspect was seen in a different light. Not as the architect of deceit, but as the casualty of a system more concerned with headlines than facts. John Ramsey became something more complex, a symbol of what happens when justice is driven by assumption rather than evidence. He represented every innocent person caught in the crosshairs of public hysteria, every parent judged too quickly, every suspect named too soon. The media, once ravenous for his downfall, now treaded cautiously. Some offered quiet acknowledgments of error. Others pivoted their focus elsewhere, uncomfortable with admitting fault. But in the shadows, the scars remained. Even as the official narrative shifted, doubt never fully disappeared. It lingered in whispers, in online forums, in sidelong glances. John Ramsey may have escaped the grip of legal suspicion, but in the minds of many he would forever occupy a strange space, neither fully guilty nor entirely innocent. A man trapped in the gray zone of America's most infamous unsolved crime. It didn't come from a confession. It wasn't whispered by a surprise witness. It emerged quietly, deep within a laboratory report, yet it changed everything. A DNA sample. Male. Unidentified. It was found on JonBenet Ramsey's clothing, a small, nearly invisible detail that had remained overlooked through years of accusations, speculation, and endless debate. The test result was beyond dispute. It wasn't from John Ramsey. It wasn't from Patsy Ramsey. And it wasn't from Burke Ramsey. This wasn't a theory. It wasn't rumor. It wasn't another sensational headline. It was truth, solid, undeniable, inescapable. That discovery didn't merely challenge the old narrative. It obliterated it. For the first time since that fateful Christmas night in 1996, there was hard, physical evidence, proof that the Ramsey family had not been alone in their house. That DNA told its own story, a story of another presence, of an unknown intruder, someone who left their trace in the most private, vulnerable place imaginable. There was no longer room for speculation or guesswork. Only a cold, immutable fact remained: if the DNA didn't belong to the Ramseys, it had to belong to someone else. Someone who had been there. Someone who had touched her. Someone who had yet to be identified. In that moment, the investigation shifted, not because police wanted it to, nor because the media allowed it, but because science demanded it. From the very first moments, the investigation was already unraveling. Before the sun had even risen over Boulder, mistakes were quietly accumulating, errors that would haunt this case forever. The Ramsey home, a sprawling house with hidden corners and winding staircases, should have been locked down the moment police arrived. But it wasn't. Officers allowed friends, neighbors, and even church members to walk in and out freely, some offering comfort, others simply standing in shocked silence. No one stopped them. As hours passed, crucial spaces inside the home remained unsearched. Entire rooms, including the very basement where JonBenet's body was later discovered, were ignored in the initial walkthrough. Vital evidence sat untouched, unseen, as investigators focused elsewhere, assuming they had time. They didn't. Even the most basic forensic protocols were delayed. DNA samples weren't collected promptly. Physical evidence, like fibers, hair, and fingerprints, remained unsecured while people moved through the scene, contaminating everything they touched. Detectives missed clear signs, marks on windows, unusual objects out of place, potential points of entry and escape. These weren't subtle points, they were flashing signals. And they were all but ignored. By the time authorities realized the gravity of their oversights, it was too late. The crime scene was no longer a puzzle to be solved, it was a shattered mirror, impossible to piece back together. In those first chaotic hours, the truth wasn't just buried. It was erased. He wasn't brought in to defend the Ramseys. He wasn't hired to protect reputations. He was brought in to find the truth wherever it led. Lou Smith was a detective unlike most. A veteran investigator with decades of experience solving the most complicated murders in Colorado, Smith had earned a reputation for seeing what others missed. His methods were quiet, meticulous, and patient, more surgeon than soldier. As he pored over the Ramsey case files, the crime scene photos, the evidence logs, and every overlooked detail, a different picture began to form. What others had dismissed, he couldn't ignore. The broken basement window wasn't just broken, it was an invitation. The suitcase positioned beneath that window wasn't random, it was a step. Marks on the wall, disturbed debris on the floor, an odd scuff here, an unusual trace there, they all told the same story. To Lou Smith, it was clear this wasn't the work of a family member. It was a predator, someone from outside. Someone who had entered through that window, with intent and precision. Everywhere he looked, he found evidence of an intruder, points of entry, patterns of movement, signs of staging. The more he studied, the clearer it became. Lou Smith wasn't afraid to speak his findings aloud. He stood before the cameras against the tide of public opinion and made his position clear. He believed John and Patsy Ramsey were innocent. Not because they seemed trustworthy, not because they were wealthy or well-connected, but because the evidence told him so. In his eyes, the true killer had never been inside the Ramsey family. The real culprit had walked in from the outside and walked away, leaving the world pointing fingers in the wrong direction. He wasn't called to analyze fingerprints. He wasn't there to review DNA. His expertise was far more unsettling, understanding the mind of a killer. John Douglas, one of the most renowned criminal profilers in FBI history, had built his career by crawling inside the darkest minds in America: murderers, kidnappers, predators. He wasn't easily shaken. When Douglas approached the Ramsey case, he did what he always did: he stripped away the noise. Ignoring media narratives, public outrage, and even police theories, he focused solely on behavior, on the sequence of choices that shaped the crime. Piece by piece, he built a psychological portrait of the killer. It wasn't subtle. Douglas didn't see signs of an impulsive act born from family tension or household rage. He didn't see the kind of personal violence typical in cases of domestic homicide. Instead, what emerged from the evidence was something colder, more calculated. A deliberate offender. Someone who harbored deep resentment toward John Ramsey or his family, perhaps jealousy, perhaps personal hatred. Someone who had studied them, watched them, and chosen their moment to strike. Douglas found no behavioral evidence pointing to John, Patsy, or Burke Ramsey. Everything about the crime suggested distance, not intimacy. In his professional opinion, this wasn't a crime of convenience. It was a crime of obsession. John Douglas reached his conclusion with clinical certainty. He agreed with Lou Smith: the Ramseys were not the perpetrators. The real danger hadn't come from inside the home. It had come from outside, where it still remained. Time moved forward. Seasons changed. News cycles moved on. But inside the walls of the Ramsey household, the shadow never lifted. Years after DNA shattered the original theory, after experts spoke out, after the media softened its tone, one truth remained painfully intact: JonBenet Ramsey's killer had never been caught. For John Ramsey, vindication, in the eyes of science and specialists, wasn't enough. It didn't bring closure. It didn't bring peace. The question still lingered. Who left behind that DNA? Who knew every corner of their home so well? Who had every corner of that house, unseen, untouched, never to be named? The investigation, now decades old, had grown cold in the hands of bolder authorities. Leads had dried up. Evidence sat untouched. But John Ramsey wasn't done. In the years that followed, he began to fight a different kind of battle, not for himself, but for his daughter. He pushed for advanced DNA testing, urging investigators to use the newest technology, hoping that somewhere in a database, a match could be found. He lobbied lawmakers for new policies, giving victims' families the right to demand case reviews and independent investigations. And in every interview, every rare public appearance, his message remained the same: this case could still be solved. The true killer was still out there, and JonBenet Ramsey still deserved justice. Yet for all the science, all the headlines, and all the scrutiny, one chilling question remained, echoing through every empty room and every cold case file. Would the truth ever be found? Or had the real killer simply vanished into history, leaving behind a mystery that America was never meant to solve? John Ramsey after the case. John Ramsey, once thrust into the heart of America's most sensational murder mystery, gradually retreated from the relentless spotlight that followed the 1996 death of his daughter JonBenet. The man who stood before cameras, fiercely defending his family's innocence and demanding justice, chose to step away, ending press conferences and televised appeals. The media frenzy that consumed his life for years began to fade, and John withdrew into silence, allowing time to dull the public's obsession. In rare appearances, such as interviews or carefully selected documentaries, his message remained unwavering: his family was innocent. The killer remained at large, and the case was far from resolved. For John, the fight was never about clearing his name, but about solving the crime and identifying the perpetrator who slipped away that Christmas night. His withdrawal marked a shift from loud advocacy to a quieter resolve, carrying the same burden in solitude, away from the public's gaze. The years following the investigation brought profound personal losses that reshaped John's life. In 2006, he lost his wife Patsy to ovarian cancer, a devastating blow as she had been his staunchest defender through accusations and media scrutiny. This was not his first tragedy. In 1992, he had buried his eldest daughter, Elizabeth, after a car accident, a grief that lingered long before JonBenét's murder. These losses left John increasingly isolated, his inner circle shrinking as the voices around him, both supportive and accusatory, faded. The emotional toll was immense. With empty holidays, silent birthdays, and a house haunted by memories of JonBenet, whose bedroom remained forever closed. Grief transformed him into a quieter, more withdrawn figure, no longer seeking public attention, but surviving in the shadows of a life marked by unrelenting tragedy. Seeking escape from Boulder, Colorado, a city synonymous with his pain, John relocated to quieter places, craving anonymity. For a time, he lived in Las Vegas, blending into a city where secrets were commonplace. In 2011, he remarried Jan Russox, a fashion designer, and together they crafted a private existence, far from the glare of reporters and curious strangers. John avoided talk shows and press conferences, guarding his personal life with care. Yet, even in this new chapter, he quietly continued his fight for justice, supporting charities for victims' rights and unsolved cases with little fanfare. In 2012, he published The Other Side of Suffering, a memoir reflecting not on the murder, but on surviving grief and suspicion, offering a glimpse into a life redefined by loss. John's mission centered on advancing the investigation through science, particularly forensic genealogy and advanced DNA testing, which he believed could identify the killer from evidence left behind. He relentlessly pressed the Boulder Police Department to use these modern tools, accusing them of neglect, pride, and incompetence for failing to act. His pointed question, "Do you still have the evidence?" reflected frustration and a demand for accountability, suggesting their inaction was a deliberate avoidance of past mistakes. He advocated for legislation to empower families of murder victims to demand fresh investigations, ensuring others wouldn't face the same unresolved nightmare. In private, he worked with organizations supporting families of unsolved homicides, sharing his experiences with legal obstacles and public judgment, offering honesty forged from his own scars. Despite his retreat, John remains a polarizing figure. To some, he is a wrongly accused father, crushed by a failed justice system and a media that fed on his grief, symbolizing the innocent destroyed by premature blame. To others, he is an enigma, tied to lingering contradictions and unanswered questions, forever linked to a crime too complex to unravel. His name is inseparable from JonBenét's murder, a symbol of suspicion and tragedy. Yet, the text highlights the human cost often overlooked. A father who carried his daughter's body, chose her casket, and lived with the silence of her absence, compounded by the losses of Elizabeth and Patsy. In rare moments, John's wariness and loneliness surface, revealing a man surviving, not by choice but necessity, driven by an obligation to uncover the truth in DNA evidence, a fight that transcends redemption for resolution. The unfinished story. Decades later, the case remains unsolved. JonBenet Ramsey's killer has never been named, never been brought to justice. But while the truth still hides in shadows, the public's perception of John Ramsey has shifted. He is no longer widely seen as the prime suspect, the man whose face once defined guilt in the eyes of a nation. Over time, as new evidence emerged and the investigation's failures came to light, his image slowly changed. Now, more often than not, John Ramsey is spoken of not as a villain, but as a victim. A victim of a broken system. A victim of a media machine that devoured grief and spit out scandal. Today, his name stirs something different in many who once judged him. Not suspicion, but something closer to understanding. But even now, after all these years, after all the theories and investigations, one thing remains: the DNA. It is the last thread connecting this case to the possibility of truth. It has outlived detectives, headlines, and courtroom battles. It has survived the passage of time. Today, it stands as the only undeniable piece of evidence left in a case clouded by speculation and error. For many, including John Ramsey himself, this DNA isn't just another clue. It's the key, the one remaining chance to unlock what really happened inside that house. Hope now lies in technology, tools that didn't in 1996, but do today. Forensic genealogy, advanced DNA databases, and cutting-edge testing techniques offer the possibility of finding the name behind that genetic code. But even with that hope, the path forward depends on something far more unpredictable than science: the willingness to act. Because no matter how advanced the technology becomes, it will mean nothing if those holding the evidence refuse to use it. In the end, after every headline, every investigation, every theory exhausted, the case leaves the audience with a question that no detective, no reporter, no court has ever been able to fully answer. A question that lingers long after the screen fades to black. Was John Ramsey simply a father, devastated, destroyed by grief, left to carry the unbearable weight of loss? Or is there still something more, something hidden, something never uncovered, something that even now waits, quietly buried beneath decades of noise and silence? It is the question no documentary can answer. It is the question that continues to divide everyone who watches this story unfold. And it is the question that will follow John Ramsey for the rest of his life. The screen fades to a soft, dim shot of a man sitting alone, Ramsey, older now, marked by time. He sits in a simple chair, in a room stripped of decoration, surrounded by shadows. In his hands, he holds a photograph, JonBenet's smiling face, frozen in time. He doesn't speak. He doesn't move. The camera lingers, holding steady as the weight of the moment fills the frame. There is no music, no narration, only silence. And as the shot slowly fades to black, the silence deepens, leaving the story unfinished, the questions unanswered, the grief still lingering. This story, like so many others, doesn't end with answers. It ends with what remains: questions, doubt, silence. In the world of unsolved crimes, some cases are more than just puzzles, they are mirrors. They reflect what we fear most: the unknown, the misunderstood, and the possibility that some truths are meant to stay buried. John Ramsey's story is no longer just about guilt or innocence. It's about what happens when a family becomes trapped inside a story that never lets them go. And long after this film ends, their story continues. In a positive viewpoint, the JonBenet Ramsey case exposed significant flaws in police investigative procedures, prompting positive changes in law enforcement practices. The Boulder Police Department's initial mishandling, including failure to secure the crime scene, allowing friends to contaminate evidence, and premature focus on the Ramsey family, led to lost evidence and an unresolved case. These errors became a catalyst for reform. Departments nationwide began emphasizing stricter crime scene protocols, ensuring immediate lockdowns to preserve evidence integrity, as seen in modern guidelines like those from the National Institute of Justice. Training programs now stress forensic awareness, teaching officers to limit scene access and document meticulously, avoiding the chaos that marred the Ramsey investigation. The case also highlighted the importance of interagency collaboration, leading to improved coordination between police, FBI, and forensic labs, as evidenced by standardized evidence handling. Advances in DNA technology, spurred by the case's unidentified DNA evidence, have driven adoption of forensic genealogy, solving cold cases like the Golden State Killer. Additionally, the case underscored the need for unbiased investigations, prompting training to avoid tunnel vision, ensuring suspects are evaluated based on evidence rather than media. John Ramsey's advocacy for legislative changes has also empowered victims' families to demand re-investigation, influencing laws like Colorado's 2013 cold case review legislation. These reforms, born from the case's failures, have strengthened investigative rigor, enhanced forensic capabilities, and prioritized objectivity, ensuring future cases benefit from lessons learned in Boulder.